Hi, how are you? How are you? Why are you? That's kind of the theme of identity access management in this domain. Um, who are you, what you can do with who you are, allowing you in, things like that. It's all about identity, obviously explained. But and this domain, I'm going to talk about a little bit what that means in terms of the CISSP exam and the scope, and some things I might have dealt with in the real world that make it real. I'm definitely tired right now. I'm not gonna edit that out. Edits here. Do this all in one take. So over to the other monitor, and there we go. So most of the stuff. Oh, yeah, I definitely have to update that piece. That's from the last domain. But yeah, I'll update that for this domain. But the elevator pitch is, so who are you? How do I know who you are? Um, how do you get in, or how do you gain access to said object? And then once you have that, when you have access, what can you do with your access or with who you are? And overall, with that, well, are you doing the correct things with said access? And is it what you need? And that's the accountability. So I actually mentioned that down here. And I'm not doing this in a particular order. This is what most things I am or revolve around for the exam anyway. Going to refer to your 5 elements: identification, authorization, authentication, auditing, and accounting. So authentication is your process of verifying or testing the identity of the subject, making sure it's valid. And then once you've done that, you're determining what is that subject authorized to do. Do they have the appropriate level of permissions to do what they need to do to access their objects? And to ensure they are doing the correct things with their access, auditing that. There's a lot of terminology here. When I was taking a practice test, this is the domain I struggle with the most. Despite what I say about security engineering or domain 3 being the big one, there's a lot of content, but I didn't struggle as bad as opposed to this. Possibly because out of all the domains, this is the one that, in terms of the terminology and how things work, I wasn't as well versed with with a lot of the terminology and what things were. And there are some things, even a couple of technical things that I just started learning not too long ago, particularly related around Kerberos. There's quite a bit on here on that. Um, One thing that you need to get familiar with are the three types of authentication. So something you know, something you have, and something you are. Something you know can be in terms of passwords. I didn't get into too much into what things do with passwords as far as the difference between static dynamic ones and one time. But definitely like in passphrases, kind of gotten a little more familiar with salts over the years. I made separate videos on this later, as there's gonna be whole other topics you can cover just on those, particularly with passwords and dictionary lists, things like that. I've got something fun planned for that. Um, yeah, and then different attacks, different ways to attack passwords. Let's next you get into you have. So I'll add the definitions for the synchronous and asynchronous dynamic tokens. I'll need some more details here. So for now, I'm going to skip over something you are. This is a fun one, particularly with biometric security. There's these terms called false acceptance rate, false rejection rate, and crossover error rate. So what that means is, let's just say you have your facial recognition on your phone, right? When they're designing that system, there's a lot of bugs that work out with it. And you know how if you try and scan your own face to unlock your phone, if it doesn't work, that's what's called a false rejection rate. If it works for somebody else, for instance, that wasn't given access to your phone, that's a false acceptance rate. And when you're tuning these things out, you're wanting to kind of have them meet an equilibrium where you have the best acceptance rate and false rejection rate as possible where it meets. And that's where your crossover error rate is, where that describes how accurate that system is. And you're wanting to get to tune it to a more desired state. So where it's has the least amount of false rejections and the least amount of false exceptions. You want true positive more often than not. And there's a lot of this definitely applies more to biometric systems. Other ones that may apply, but those particularly there's some kind of component to the acceptance rate. I included a video. There's a video I found that showed this pistol that had a biometric lock on it, and there's these researchers that found a way to bypass it using a magnet. That would be an example of a false acceptance rate going too high. Next thing you get to cover, and this is where it got tricky, was the access control models. And that's the terminology gets a little dicey. So I did notice I need to fix this. So anytime I've seen the questions come up on the practice test I've taken, it will always, like, role based is more often than not in acronym form, so RBAC, and then rule based is often you won't often see RAC. It'll be RBAC, role based, or rule based, and it's very confusing. That's one thing I did to differentiate. But describing, so role based is based on a particular role you have for a subject to access object, and it's very narrow focus. So rule based, it's more like, say, a much broader, like a firewall rule that's applied to an IP address, a subnet, source destination, etc. Discretionary access control. Yeah, I need to finish adding that stuff, and I'll have that stuff by the time this is uploaded. Most of the stuff is finished, not all. Different forms of identity management. Have your I've seen this more often than not, and because I've worked on a lot of Active Directory environments, so LDAP is common. It's cool because you can query things with it really well. You can create different rules based on it. Can also do some kind of attacks on it too. And then one thing I did, this is a real world story, and I'm going to circle back to the whole authentication authorization thing. But with Kerberos, it's basically an authentication service. In the project I work on in particular, it was converting SharePoint, a SharePoint application from NTLM over to Kerberos, and there's a lot of steps involved. I learned stuff about, like, service principal names, and basically what it would do is the issue we were correcting was you connect over VPN, and then you're trying to connect to some web application, right? So when that happened, it would create what's called a double hop. So it'd have to authenticate twice, and it would kind of time you out and have issues with it. Kerberos, what that did was, because when you're authenticating on these particular web applications, Kerberos, it wasn't just logging onto the web application; it was logging onto the other internal application. That's where it kind of like caused conflicts and would drop connections. So doing that, you'd link. When it would connect, it's basically going out to a server to get a ticket, and after you log in, and I've got the steps stumbling through this, but this is once again meant to be brief. I am, for your benefit, going to include a bunch of links describing this stuff in detail. But so you're getting authenticated, and then the authentication server gives you a ticket granting ticket. I got the terms up here too. That ticket's sent to the ticket granting server saying, "Hey, I got a ticket. I have my ticket now." The ticket granting server issues a service ticket for that particular service application. You now contact that service with a ticket, and then it goes, "Okay, you're the right person." So once you do that, you have access to roam around in whatever that service provides. And I know I stumbled through that explanation. Also lacking a little sleep right now. Anyway, moving forward, one thing I've experienced more so, because most of my roles haven't been around identity access management. However, I do notice a trend I've seen in a lot of places. Every place will get one or two of these domains really, really well and right and efficient with it, and then struggle with a couple, and then kind of like bell curve with a couple. So in some places that were weaker with their identity access management, I've seen things like, oh, really a lot of misuse of privilege. So, for instance, somebody, especially if it's in a smaller organization where people will shift different jobs, somebody's permissions will create basically permissions creep. That person will move over to another group, and they won't have their access for the old stuff they had before won't be revoked, and they continue getting more and more access, more and more access, and that person's account becomes a huge liability because now they have access to all these things, even if it's not related to their job, and it becomes a lot, and it becomes a pain to manage. Or in some cases, even the offboarding accounts may not be disabled. Definitely been seen that a few times. And I'm not naming any particular company. I'm pretty sure the audience watching this video, I'm pretty sure a lot of you have your own stories validating everything I'm saying about these access control. And remember another place that had a tendency to I half joke when I say this, but they would basically issue domain admin with with your employee badge. So that means you'd have a ridiculous amount of access you don't need or whatever you do in a given job. Like your accountants having domain admin, probably not necessary for what they do. I mean, even IT folks, they don't need one account that has access to 50 things, and that's where the smart approach for that would be to create service accounts and things tied to a different service, or a privileged account that lets you do those specific. Let's see, what else do I have in here? What else I cover? Yeah, I went through most of the terminology and stuff. Like I said, have some more definitions to add. By the time this post, you see more stuff in here complete. Um, I include a lot more stuff in Kerberos. Oh, so attacking Kerberos, and this isn't the scope for these videos or series, but what I'm gonna do is pick some of the stuff out of here I want to talk about more in terms of attacking more offensive stuff. And that's going to be its own set of videos outside of this. But for now, this is all about getting you through the exam and with what you need. Below, I have links to the YouTube channel, back to the YouTube video, links to the Inside Cloud Security playlist. That's a really good one. I will emphasize over and over as I've done in all other videos. Having those on hand are that like that. Here's what I used to do. So when I was studying for this, I one of the few reasons I have YouTube Premium aside from the YouTube Music is to be able to download the videos on my device. And so I've only watched them a couple times, but I've definitely listened to them hundreds of times. I would go on a walk, put on one of these videos. A couple of the domains, particularly the engineering one's about an hour and a half, so that's a nice solid walk. And I would just play them over and over. I'd be cooking something and I'd have the videos playing over and over, which reminds me I need to um, get some food out of the oven in a minute. Anyway, so yeah, those videos are good. I will include some more hands-on stuff. I know this is kind of dry, but this, again, the scope is exam. The real learning is going to begin after you pass the exam when you're trying to keep up with stuff and adding more stuff on. I definitely can tell you you'll be able to start diving deeper. One thing, especially with Active Directory Kerberos related stuff, I recommend is try Hack Me. They have a lot of things on there as far as different challenges you can go through. I wouldn't call it the same as Hack the Box in the sense, as those just put you on an environment, a platform with a bunch of boxes to attack, or binaries to reverse and other things like that. With Try Hack Me, it'll walk you through stuff like the steps really slow, and that's when I start doing more hands-on stuff, I'll start getting into it. Particularly with the all things Kerberos and AD related, you'll learn about Bloodhound and how effective that is, and you'll learn about different Kerberos attacks like passing the hash, golden ticket, etc. So I'm gonna go through those things slowly and learn and write notes and stuff. With that, oh yeah, so your access control protocols, get familiar with these, particularly just get familiar with the differences between. So you're not going to need to know them that deep, at least for the scope of the exam. But remembering, let's forget there was something specific about diameter I'll need to add. But understand that radius runs on UDP. Your password authentication protocol is the insecure one because your password is in clear text, and CHAP is a challenge handshake authentication protocol. It's stronger. It does provide some encryption again and protects against relay attacks, playback attacks. Let's see. TACAX and TACAX Plus. The difference between the two is TACAX Plus uses TCP and can use TCP as well as UDP. The ports, and this is where it gets interesting because Kerberos has a few ports. You're not going to need to know all the ports, but going back to what I said about communications and network security, get familiar with a lot of the ports. If it sounds like I've memorized a lot of them when I mention this stuff, it's not that I have. I've just been doing this stuff for so long, and troubleshooting working on a lot of different applications. So my background came from supporting desktop applications, and then sysadmin level stuff like Exchange and SharePoint, and then going down those rabbit holes, and then getting into security and doing a lot of the standard blue team stuff. So all those things, and this is why people say it's good to have a few. You don't need to do like 18, 19 years, believe it or no, you don't. But a few years of that environment, or checking the box on specific things to accomplish as a sysadmin, help desk, etc., those will give you a good foundation. And this stuff won't seem so overwhelming because when you do stuff enough times to know what the difference between SSL and TLS is, or what ports your web application uses, and what ports like for phones, that when you start supporting systems, you start getting a good idea. Like 1433, that's SQL. 3389, that's MySQL. So like those will get really familiar with you really fast. With that, I didn't want to drag this out much longer. I definitely need to get some sleep, and definitely need to finish adding some of the glossary terms here. But with that, I'm going to start working on the next video, and you folks have a good rest of your day.